I was a veritable Marlon Brando in his rooms in King's that day, and I said, okay, don't publish, see if I care. It goes back to the year 1972, when I was a fresh-faced young composer and conductor living at Cambridge and working quite a bit in association with a figure who is very well known to everyone in the choral world, Sir David Wilcox. Now, he was the director of music at King's College Choir in Cambridge, and he was also the conductor of the Bach Choir in London, of a large choir, a very excellent one. And it was part of their annual programme to give a pair of concerts in London's Royal Albert Hall, which of course is a magnificent 5,500 seater round-ish hall with a terrific, wonderful organ. And the idea of the carol concerts that the Bach Choir did there was that mostly it would be the Bach Choir accompanied by organ and with the wonderful Philip Jones Brass Ensemble, who were kind of world leaders in the world of brass playing. And a particular thing that happened each year was that the children in the audience, aged between 7 and 10, were invited up onto the stage. And they sang along with the Bach Choir some of the familiar carols that young children would know, like Away in a Manger, Little Jesus, Sweetly Sleep, and all of those. But in 1972, David Wilcox came to me with an idea, and he said, John, it would be fun if you wrote a new carol, specially for the children, to sing along with the Bach Choir. And they would learn their parts right up there on stage, no advanced preparation. And so they would just need to have a refrain that is simple, easy to pick up, and then they can sing along with the choir. And I've spoken to quite a number of, oh my goodness me, they've practically got grandchildren now, but some of the people who took part in that first performance, and they've said, you know, just being a little kid in the audience, it was so exciting going up on stage and singing with this wonderful choir. And so I said to David when he came to me, well, David, that's a lovely idea, but the concert's next week. And he said, oh yes, well, I'm sure you can write it for us, John. And so I sat down, and pretty darn quick, I wrote the Star Carol. And I think it was the night before the concert. I wrote it with organ accompaniment. And David said, oh, I'd love the Philip Jones brass to be able to play along with it as well. So can you add brass parts? And timpani and percussion, which were played by the legendary James Blades. And anybody who's been involved in the world of orchestras will remember Jimmy Blades. He was a legend. And so the night before, I had another even more urgent task, which was to score it for brass, timpani and percussion with organ. And as you learn the Star Carol, you'll quickly see that the verse, which is sung just by the choir, is quite tricky. And it's one of those annoying pieces that sounds very simple when you've got it right, but does just have a few little corners you have to turn. And then there's a refrain which comes after the verse, which is very simple. And that was the bit that all the children joined in. See his star shining bright in the sky this Christmas night. The words are, I have to say the words are childlike, maybe even childish, but you have to remember that those were the original performers, and picture hundreds and hundreds of children up on stage, crowding into every corner. I'm afraid since then, the health and safety fairy has interfered, and they can no longer do that on the stage of the Royal Albert Hall. It's considered much too dangerous to invite children up there, along with the adults overcrowding and all of that. So if the request had come just 15 years later, there would be no Star Carol. because it wouldn't have been possible to perform it in that way. And of course, composers are a little bit like slot machines. You know, you put a coin in and it sets us going. And if it hadn't been for that idea of Sir David Wilcox's to write a carol for children and for adults together, again, there would have been no Star Carol. I thought it would only get one performance, and that has proved not to be the case because it did seem to catch on. The only little postscript to the story of how I wrote it was that the question of publication came up. And Sir David was an editorial advisor to Oxford University Press, who are my publisher and his. And he said, oh, well, Star Carol, yes, I'm sure he'll publish it. And he came to look at it and said, well, John, he said, I'm afraid there's one note in the refrain that's just wrong. And he pointed to it. And I said, well, what's wrong with it, David? I don't like it. And I said, well, it was what I meant. And David was capable of great determination at times, but then, young as I was, so was I. And he said, well, I think if you won't change it, then that affects my willingness to have it published. And I took my courage into both hands. I was a veritable Marlon Brando in his rooms in King's that day. And I said, okay, don't publish, see if I care. And it didn't disrupt what was a warm friendship. I owe David a massive debt, and so do so many musicians around the world in choral music. And I remember what that note was. I'm not going to tell you what it was. And I looked at it again just recently. And I thought, well, I'm sorry, but I think he was still wrong. And that maybe I did the right thing in standing my ground. So for better or worse, you will be learning the unaltered Star Carol. I wish you a very happy time with the rehearsals. The accompaniment was specially recorded by my great friends, the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra.